Welcome to March's meeting for the Brenda Novak book group. This one I have been particularly excited about. I am so happy that we have Kristin Hanna joining us. She is one of my all-time favorite authors. That's something that I get asked so often. They'll say, well, who are some of your favorite authors? And she is definitely at the top of the list. And her book, The Four Winds, she just hit it out of the park. It certainly did not disappoint. It was everything I hoped it would be. But before we get started talking about the book and bring Kristin on, I wanted to tell you to share this video for a chance to win a $50 gift card to the Brenda Novak store. As you know, that's where we sell our fabulous book boxes and other goodies. And make sure that you put in the comments where you're from, because it's always fun to look through and see where our members live, what state, which country. Also, I wanted to announce the winner of the March Brenda Novak book box. As you know, we sold out of these so quickly, but we always hold one or two back for our giveaways. And as you know, before every meeting, we post in the book group a post that says, let us know if you'll be there, and leave a question for our guest. And so everybody who participated on that post was entered into this drawing to win one of our very last March Brenda Novak book boxes, and Kathy Bennett was our lucky winner. So congratulations to her, but she was generous and sweet enough to say that if she wins, she wants the box to go to somebody who has never had the pleasure of getting one. So that means we get to give it away again, which is super exciting. So put in the comments if you have never received a Brenda Novak book box, and we will just randomly choose a winner, and we will tag that winner when we tag all the other winners from this evening's event. I know that, or you probably know that the bookstore on the beach will be coming out in just, I think we're less than 2 weeks. And so we're getting down to it. I'm expecting 2,000 copies of these to be delivered to my door any day. They're running late, so that makes me a little nervous. We're hoping they get here soon. I know that they're coming on a big truck that actually has to have a lift gate to lower it. It's almost 2,000 pounds of books. So I've got my work cut out for me getting all of those signed, but they will be going into April's Brenda Novak book box along with those Darling Well bookends. I hope you've seen them because I think they're just so cute, very beachy. And they will also be going into our Brenda Novak launch party packages. If you don't have my virtual launch party on your calendar, I hope you'll get it on now. It's going to be Tuesday, April 13th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And we have some unusual things planned this time. We're currently working on our digital goodie bag that we plan to be giving everybody. So make sure that you join us for that. You can get a ticket at brendanovak.com, or you can get a free ticket in any package that contains one of the autographed books. So I hope to see you all there. Also, I wanted to let you know while we're talking about the boxes that we are almost sold out of May's book boxes. So if you're looking forward to getting one of May's, then definitely go on and grab it soon. I think we only have 30 out of the 800 that we're doing left. It's my birthday box, so it's a tradition that I get to pick out all the items that go in it as some of my favorite things. And if you're getting April's box, you'll also be getting a copy of Reading with Brenda Novak, which has a spread in there that goes over each item I've picked and why I picked it. So anyway, I'm excited about May's box, as you can tell. And you are the first to know that June and July are we just listed those today. So June's box is up, July's box is up. So if you've been waiting for that, make sure you go on and grab one. Also, I wanted to announce that we are going to be having another photo contest. So if you remember how it worked with A California Christmas, this will be pretty much the same. It'll be for the bookstore on the beach, the new book, of course. The grand prize is going to be a year's worth of Brenda Novak book boxes. As you know, that's over a $600 value, so I cannot wait to see who's going to win that. Ellen Palmer is the person who won our last photo contest, and all you have to do to enter is take a picture of the book in any way you'd like to do it, on the beach, with yourself, with your pet, in a cool chair, however you'd like to do it, and post it on social media with the hashtag the bookstore on the beach. That makes it so that I can find it and enter you into the contest. And if you are shy and don't want to post publicly, that's fine too. We want to make it so that everybody can enter. Just email your entry to news@brendanovak.com. The winner will be picked randomly, but we will have a secondary winner for the person who gets the most creative. So there will be a couple prizes involved in that, and the winner will be announced at our next book group meeting, which is going to be on a Tuesday, of course, same time, 5 p.m. Pacific, and it'll be April 29th. So with all of that out of the way, I wanted to welcome Kristin Hanna. I'm sure you know her titles, but some of her books include the international blockbuster The Nightingale, Winter Garden, Night Road, Firefly Lane, and which you know is a Netflix series that I'm currently really enjoying. I'm watching that with my husband even. And so hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit of the inside scoop about Firefly Lane and how that all came to be too. And now, of course, The Four Winds. So welcome, Kristin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you. We all loved The Four Winds. I mean, I hope you've seen some of these comments of people raving about the book. That must feel really good to you.
It was lovely. I sort of, started looking at some of the comments and the questions and how lovely your readers are.
Yeah, so, they really put a lot of thought into some of these questions too. You could tell that the book really impacted them deeply as it's really a moving book. Why don't you start though by telling us how you got into writing? Let's get a little bit of background.
The origin story. So, I was not one of those people who were always going to be a writer. I never took writing classes in college. I was never very interested in it. It really all started for me when I was in my third year of law school, and my mother was at the end of her battle with breast cancer. So it was obviously a very difficult time. I was 24 years old and, sort of facing the prospect of the world without her. But because I was 24, I was, of course, consumed with my own life. And so I was at her bedside one day complaining about my classes. And my mom said, "Oh, don't worry, honey, you're going to be a writer anyway." And, my dad, I'm sure, was in the room going, "Oh my gosh, we just got her into law school. She finally, is doing something. Why would you say that?" But somehow, and it still feels like magic to me all these years later, somehow we decided to write a book together, the two of us, in the time that she had left. Yeah. And so, being mother and daughter, of course, we immediately started arguing about what kind of book to write. She wanted to write historical romance because it was her favorite genre and she loved history. And I wanted to write horror because Stephen King is my guy and that's what I was reading at the time. And so we sort of argued back and forth. And, ultimately my mom said, "I'm sick. I pick. We're writing historical romance." And so for whatever reason, we picked 18th century Scotland and just, started researching. So every day after classes, I would go to her bedside, go to the library, and just Xerox reams and reams of anything I could find about the 18th century. And we started plotting this book. And I actually started writing it the day she died. Oh. And I was able to sort of lean down and say, I started. But after she passed away, I had no interest in being a writer. I was a reader. So I put all that in a box and graduated law school and started working, married my husband. And the only thing I really took away from that time period was now I was reading historical romances, copiously. And I fell in love with the hopefulness and the beauty of the genre. And so several years later, when I got pregnant with my son, I had a difficult pregnancy and I was confined to bed rest for 7 months. And so, there was nothing to do. This is 1987. There was no TV. There was no internet. Everybody else I knew was working. And so before I went completely mad, I thought, okay, I'm going to write that book. And I thought the way people classically do, how hard can it be? I'll just sit down and write it. And so that's what I did. For the 7 months that I was bedridden, I just sat down and wrote this historical romance that, we had come up with. And amazingly, I was so intrinsically talented that I didn't have to edit it. I didn't have to change a word. I just wrote beginning to end, no changes. and then thought, what lucky agent should I send this masterpiece to? Because I had been to an RWA conference or a writers conference at one point, and they said that they were looking for the next Kathleen Woodiwiss. And so I thought, well, that's me, clearly. And, of course, I learned very quickly it was not going to be that easy. But that's how I got started.
Wow. I mean, I'm actually really surprised by that story, because our stories are sort of similar. First of all, I'm terribly sorry about your mother. I'm very sorry about that. I lost my father early too. I just had been married at 20. So I know he was my nurturing parent. So I understand how that feels. So I'm sorry about that. But as far as not expecting to be a writer, I didn't expect to be a writer either. So it's interesting that we both sort of found our way in here anyway. I mean, and you seem to really have enjoyed the switch. Like, you really love what you're doing.
Well, and maybe this is true for you too. What it gave me and what its appeal was originally was I really wanted to be an at-home mom. I just wanted to be home with my son. And maybe that was you as well, because I know you have children. And it allowed me, I know, it allowed me to be the mother that I wanted to be at every class event until my son said, for the love of God, stop haunting me, But it allowed me also to have this thing that was me and that was mine, and this way to express myself that I think was really important for me.
Yeah. No, actually, it was to stay home with my children. I caught my daycare provider drugging them with cough syrup to get them to sleep all day while I worked as a loan officer. And once I caught that in my baby's bottle, and all these things kind of clicked of, oh my gosh, that's why,
Right.
and of course I was totally freaked out, filled with mother's guilt, quit my job to stay home with them, and then was like, what do I do now? I have to eat, I have to pay the bills. So I was reading Jude Devereaux's Knight in Shining Armor, and I loved it. And I remember closing it thinking, writing is something you can do at home. I wonder if I could do this. Right. Yeah. So it was all about trying to be home with those kids. So I think that's interesting. So do you just have the one son, or do you have other children?
Just the one. And it sounds like we were at the same time. So it was really, I think, one of the golden ages of romance. I mean, the novels that were being written were so good.
There's nothing, you know what? I read a Kathleen Woodiwiss just lately, and I thought, it'll seem so dated to me. I loved it. I loved every page of it all over again. So I'm thinking, these are enduring. They're beautiful books. I really, really enjoyed her work. So is that one of your favorite authors from back then too?
She was. I think now she'd be considered historical fiction, obviously, because those books were so deeply researched and so rich. I loved Woodiwiss.
Yeah, she was. And was your mother, was she the one that imbued you with your love of reading as well as a child? Did she? Yeah. She was a big reader all along. Yeah.
I mean, I was that kid that, on the family vacation, Dad had to say, will you quit reading Lord of the Rings and look at the Grand Canyon? We have just driven 17 miles to get here,
That's great. Well, I think that the lawyer world probably missed out greatly, but we're happy to have you in the writing world. I'm sure publishing is very excited about that. I remember watching a TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert where she talked about eat, pray, love, or eat, love, pray. Anyway, I might be messing it up. But anyway, she was talking about the major success of that book. And it sort of reminded me of you, because I was thinking, Nightingale sits on the bestseller list for, I don't know, what was it, a year? On the New York Times for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I'm thinking, did that create any anxiety, thinking, how will I ever top this? Because when they asked Elizabeth that, she said, my friends would come to me and ask me that, and I'd have to tell them, yes, I'm scared to death. Like, it did raise the pressure. Did you have any trouble with that, or were you just able to continue to create and move on?
I guess the answer to that is yes and no. I remain incredibly grateful that the Nightingale was like novel 20 or novel 21, something like that. It would have been incredibly difficult to deal with earlier in the process. But even so, even knowing that it was coming, because as the bookseller reviews started coming in, and like I said, or I told you earlier in the green room, we held the book for a year to try to get the packaging right, the messaging right, to do all these things. So in that year, I began to see what people were saying about it. And I had been in the business long enough to know that it wasn't normal. And I'd even had sort of a breakthrough hit before, with Firefly Lane 10 years before. And I knew that it was even bigger than that. And so what I did was, I thought, very intelligent and very thoughtful. I decided to write a book that could not be compared to The Nightingale in any way, because everyone said, write another historical fiction. Yeah. And I said, no way, I'm not going to do that. I didn't want to write really contemporary fiction because I felt like I wanted to grow from where I was. So I ingeniously decided to write what I called a domestic thriller. So at this point, the only book really like that was Gone Girl, and it had come out and done very well. And I thought I could do that. I love thrillers. And bottom line, I spent a year and a half, and it turns out I can't. I can't write a domestic thriller. It was terrible. I could never get it right. And I think part of that was this Nightingale pressure, because now Nightingale had come out and it was, an unexpected hit. And I knew that this book wasn't good enough to follow that. And so I did a weird thing, something I've never done before or since. I took all the characters and I took the setting and I wrote a completely different book. And that was great along.
Yeah. Yeah. I have that on my nightstand. I haven't read it yet for some reason. I've just been so swamped. It's tough to get to all of it when I'm doing one book a month for the club. It seems like my writing
so hard, Brenda.
Done. But
I done.
So I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be my treat for my vacation, is that one. I have two difficult questions that I like to ask our guest authors. If you don't want to answer them, you don't have to.
Okay.
They're not that hard.
Yeah, okay.
I can tell you probably have no problem with them. One is, what has been the biggest criticism you've received, and how did you overcome it? Like, have you had a really hard spot that was tough to get beyond, and how did you deal with that?
With regard to the Four Winds, or my career?
Your career, yeah.
My career. Oh, yeah. The biggest continuing fight of my career has been to be taken seriously, given the books that I write and given that I started in romance. It was always really, really difficult to say to people, I'm writing something bigger. I want you to judge it not based on what I've written before or who you think I am. I want you to judge the books on their own basis. And that has been sort of the most difficult thing. And I think a perfect example of that is, I'm trying to think when I've been on the New York Times for, a long time, like 2 decades maybe. And most of the books have hit #1 for at least a nanosecond or so, right? Mm-hmm. And in all of those years, I've had one book reviewed by the New York Times. Wow. And that's just, an example of the way I'm constantly, I think, battling to be perceived as, yes, I write women's story. Yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I'm interested in female relationships, but that doesn't somehow make the books less valuable than men's books.
Yes, no, I totally agree with you. I've even heard stories from other fellow authors where they will grow into something else, and even at the bookstore level, they insist on shelving the author in the romance section because that's where she started. I'm thinking that doesn't fit the book anymore. So Brenda was telling me that. I chuckled.
And I think, one of the, as I was telling you in the green room, that's why my publisher and I worked so hard to package The Nightingale as something, that looked different than my previous books. Yeah,
it had to be a clear clue to the reader, so they knew what they were doing, which is so wise. So the other hard question is, and maybe it's not that hard, but who is your biggest advocate, and how did you meet them? I'm guessing you'll probably say your mother.
Well, I mean, my mother was my biggest advocate, obviously, in my formative years. She still, lives on my shoulder.
Yeah.
She's still the voice in my head. She's all of that. But, given that I have now lived, more than half my life without her, I will answer, first of all, that I've been incredibly lucky in this career to partner with incredible women. And that was, I think, the biggest gift in starting in romance when I did in the, early 90s, late 80s. It was a community where the biggest authors on the planet were helping you. Women were coming together. Sandra Brown was giving, lectures to people like me. And so it was such a supportive environment. And I made a group of friends there that is still sort of my closest group of friends. I met my critique partner essentially through that. I met my agent, Andrea Cirillo, through that, and my current editor, Jen Enderlin. So basically, all of these women are my advocate, and I advocate for them. And not only do we support each other and, advocate and fight for each other, but we're also there for each other with cocktails when things go badly. And
you gotta have that.
Yeah, this is a career where I don't care who you are, things go badly a lot of the time. And, I think the fact, it's why I write about female friendships so much, the enduring resilience of female friends have really helped me survive.
Yeah, well, you write them really well. I mean, now we'll shift a little bit into talking more specifically about the book, The Four Winds, and we'll be taking some questions that many of the readers who read the book will be have submitted, and I've got them right here. But before we get started, I just wanted to ask you, I read a book by Megan Crane. I want to say it said something about Eden in the title. And as I was reading The Four Winds, that book kind of kept coming back to me. And she's not your critique partner, is she?
No, Megan Chance.
Megan Chance. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got them switched. You're right. You're right. Do you know Megan Chance? I think she lives up there in your way, up near your way. No?
Megan Crane, you mean?
No, Megan Chance.
Oh, yeah. Megan is, she and I met right after I finished my bedridden pregnancy when my son was born. I went to a romance writers luncheon. And Debbie Macomber was speaking, in fact, and I met Megan in the bathroom because we were both hiding out because we felt so unsure in this room full of women who seemed to know what they were doing and thinking. And, somehow by kismet, we decided to start trading manuscripts at that moment in the bathroom. And we are still each other's first reader, 30 years later. Yeah.
That's amazing because it was the tone or something. There was just a feel to it. That, that book that I'm talking about had kind of that haunting connection to the land that you evoked in The Four Winds. And I remember just loving that book. It was really beautiful. I got an ARC at RWA and I really enjoyed that one too. And I enjoyed this one, of course, as well.
She's a great writer. We kind of write about the same themes. I look at the lighter side generally, and she looks at the darker side, although I'm getting darker as I get older, so who knows?
Yeah, well, it was very haunting, and I felt like it even maybe had been, not mispublished, but publishing it as a romance, I don't think really got the right demographic for it. I felt like
she brought that her whole career in romance. Yeah, that was very difficult.
But it was beautiful, and you could tell she's just a madly talented author. But anyway, back to The Four Winds. Our first question is about the cover. I think we'll start with the packaging. Kelly Morrow wants to know, did you have any input on the cover or any of your covers? Are you happy with it?
Oh, my gosh. I mean, let me just say, look at this. I mean, this thing is stunningly beautiful. I seriously want to wear it as earrings. And yes, I can say that, it took me a lot of years in my career to be in the room where it happens, have some input on my covers. But I'm very much there now, and I'm very lucky that St. Martin's, my publisher, has a seemingly endless desire to get it right. And they go through, it takes a long time because every time I'm asking them to create something I've never seen before. And that, of course, is problematic. But yeah, I love it. I have loved the last 3 covers just to distraction.
I really thought the pretty gold dust, even going around the wrap, was really pretty on the inside. But it was funny. One of our people that got a book box wrote us to say, "I think my book has mold." And we're like, "No, this is a new book. But this is supposed to be there." So we actually kind of had a little chuckle. I got mine out to look just to see what she was talking about. Like, well, I think she's talking about this pretty gold dust that is sprinkled on the inside. So that was kind of cute. Anyway, our next question is from Shannon Hansen. She said, "How did you come up with the title?"
Oh, Shannon, this is a funny story, actually. I am not very good at titles, and in fact, I don't title my books more often than not. I sort of throw it to my collective brain trust, these women that, you know, my editor, my agent, my friends, and say, help me, because I just am not very good at it in general. And the 4 Winds, for some reason, was hard for all of us. And it was because we all wanted this certain feel. We wanted this epic feel. We wanted it not too feminine, but we wanted it to feel like a book that would appeal to women, but not necessarily exclusively. And I wanted something bold. And so we just kept going back and forth, and my editor, my agent, and I, it takes all 3 of us. We all have to hit the, you know, the launch button at the same time and say, this is it. And we just couldn't do it. And then in February of last year, just as the book was getting ready to be turned in, I was taking my grandchildren to see Frozen in Los Angeles on stage. And we were trapped in LA traffic. And this bus pulls up literally right next to me and parks, and it says the 4 Winds across the side.
Perfect.
And so I took a picture of it. I sent it to the Brain Trust, and they said, you know, we have a winner.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I think it's perfect for it. It turned out so good. Sometimes the way things work out it can be surprising, right? Victoria Delp wants to know, I would love to know how long it took her to write this book. The details and research in her books are incredible and must take forever.
Thank you, Victoria. Yes, they do take a very long time. It took me about a year to just do the research and come up with the idea. I knew what I wanted to write about. I knew I wanted to take on the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, the California migration. I wanted to re-examine this sort of, I felt, forgotten part of history through a woman's eyes. So that was the idea that I went in with. And, you know, so I did like the year's worth of research. I knew what the story was going to be. And then over that year is me coming up with the characters that I think are going to people the novel, you know.
And I love the name of the heroine, Elsa. Now that I heard how you got the title.
I know.
How cute.
It's probably subconsciously why I spent years listening to Let It Go. And so, but you know, the interesting aside to this is, so I did that year's research. I wrote the synopsis, which is, as you know, the story that we tell the editor so that they'll buy the book, and the story that I set out to write. And so I worked on that for a year, and Elsa was not in the book. She was not part of my original idea at all. And at the end of the first year of writing, so 2 years into the process, she sort of walked on stage, and I pretty much knew instantly that I had to throw away everything that I had done, which I did.
Wow. That must be heart-wrenching to lose that much work.
Well, you know, I don't make the decision lightly because, you know, it's a lot. Now, the good news is, of course, it was still the same historical record. It was still the same farm in Texas. It was still the same trip west. So a lot of the stuff that I had done, you know, still existed.
Yeah.
But for me, the key is that when I'm certain enough to throw something away, that comes with a clarity. And when I have that kind of clarity, then I write like a house of fire. And Elsa was just the key to unlocking this novel.
Well, since she's the vehicle we take through the novel, did you have another character that was?
It was Loreda's story. Loreda was an adult, and it was her story.
Interesting.
And she and Rafe were brother and sister.
Oh my goodness, I love hearing the backstory to all of this.
So there you go.
Yeah. Oh, well, you turned out with just the right vehicle to take us there. Kathy Rose Henderson wants to know, do you do any traveling when you research a book? Did you do so for this one?
I do. It's one of my favorite parts. I didn't used to have time, but now that my life has slowed down a little, I do. My husband and I went to Texas, Oklahoma, did a lot of research in Austin, and then drove Route 66 and, spent a bunch of time in the San Joaquin, where you are, close to where you are, the southern part, down by Bakersfield and up to Fresno.
Yeah. Well, we actually got a lot of questions about your research. So I think somebody else in here wanted to know, how do you meld the fiction with the historical accuracy? I think might be a tough question to kind of answer. I think that's sort of instinctive how you know how to do that, but maybe you can try and field that one.
Actually, I have learned a lot about that. I had to learn it with The Nightingale, because The Nightingale was, just bigger than anything I had done before. It was set in a time period I knew nothing about, in a place I'd never been. And I knew that there were people alive who had lived through this. So I felt this pressure very keenly. And what I have learned to do, and I don't know that it would work for everybody, but it works for me, I essentially write a historical version of the novel that is all of the history in place in the time it's supposed to be, all of the scenes that I expect to write in those, with characters that are developed but not fully developed. They're almost stand-ins. And so when I then get the historical story right, which takes for me research every day constantly, even while I'm writing. So even after I've done that year's worth of research, I still have to research every day. Okay, what flower is in bloom right now? Like, how much dust was lifted up? I have to keep doing that. And I can't seem to do all of that and create fully dimensional characters as well. And so once the story is historically where I want it to be, then I try to the best of my ability to forget all of the history and to take everything that I've learned about creating characters and conflict and motivation, and then I write a story that is just about the characters. Because I find that a lot of times what I have trouble with in historical fiction as a reader is that it's research heavy and character light. And I don't ever want to feel textbooky. And so,
but without that authenticity as a backdrop, then you lose something too. So it's interesting how you're able to get such a good balance with that. And I love the amount of conflict that you put in your books, because I believe that conflict is the engine that drives the whole.
It is.
And so I am very conflict heavy in my books as well. And sometimes I worry that I'm too much. And then I'll pick up your book and I'll read it. I'll think, no, Liz got it going on. I love it. So then it kind of gives me the freedom to don't hold back. Just, put what comes naturally to you and what is interesting to you and what you think really
and it's true. That's a lesson I learned writing The Nightingale. And I always say that the reason The Nightingale is The Nightingale is because I was watching Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones while I was writing it. And those two programs, more than anything, taught me my mantra, which is make it worse. Put these people in constant hot water and see where it goes. Because I think as a reader and as a TV viewer, that's what keeps you on the edge of your seat. And so it's really important.
Absolutely. And I've even used that same example of Game of Thrones before. I'm like,
really?
You can't get more conflict than Game of Thrones. I mean, it's just, wow, this stuff's happening to everybody. And I think, okay, that to me is very compelling. But I find myself sort of hearing a few naysayers like, oh, that's depressing, and I'm thinking, sometimes are you ever tempted to listen to those contrary voices, and does it affect your writing, or do you just believe in yourself so strongly now that you just sail on through?
You know, of course I listen. You know, I remember when I wrote On Mystic Lake, which was my first sort of my hardcover breakout novel. And I started hearing from readers, oh, it made me cry. It made me cry. It made me cry. I never saw that coming. I didn't think it was a sad novel. So, and I remember thinking, this will destroy my career. And yet it was very clear to me that even when I looked back on romance, and maybe it's because of the loss of my mother, but grief and loss is part of my DNA. And it seems to be something that just naturally occurs in my writing. And, you know, I every time I set out to write a book, I think to myself, okay, I'm not going to be relentless. I'm not going to be intense. I'm not going to be all of these things. And yet,
I tell myself, that's why I'm laughing. I mean, it's that way anyway.
I know. And I'm, you know, I accept and understand and essentially agree with the idea that The Four Winds is a very intense, very sad novel a lot of the time. Yeah. And that's
so because without that conflict, without that darkness, you can't have that sweet joy that also, I mean, I cried not only for the sadness, but it was actually for when it flips around and you get that conquering of that's right. Really where the tears came more for me, and what I find most compelling, and why I like a lot of conflict, because then you do get this sort of come from behind win in the end, and you get that incredible feeling where there's no conflict. It's like watching paint dry, you know? So, but it is kind of funny because they keep, you know, asking me to write these Christmas novels, and I'm thinking, okay, Brenda, hold back. Don't have there be too much conflict in these novels, you know?
Well, I think that, I think ultimately it's cathartic in a way, but also if you want to show, in my opinion, if you want to show heroism, which is something I love, woman as hero, I love woman as warrior, I love this this new female character that's emerging.
Empowerment, yeah.
And I think if you want to show a warrior woman, she has to survive difficult things, because that's how, you know, we become warriors. And when you're writing about time periods like the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and like World War II France, I don't think you do anyone any favors by pulling back and sanitizing what it was really like.
No,
you know, I think
I agree.
You just have to accept that, you know, your book isn't maybe for everybody. No book is for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think that the way you have embraced who you are, and then you can write from a sense of authority, which comes through in your books too, which is really important. I think that that year of research also engenders that, right? Because you get that general knowledge, so you can write from a sense of knowledge, even if you haven't researched the finer details like you do as you write. So I think that's a great way to go. Carol Mastromarchi wants to know, she asked if you talked to anyone whose parents or grandparents lived through the Great Depression. Did you have any firsthand tales where people were telling you what it was like?
I did. And I also spoke to some people, some women who had lived in the migrant camps in California. Oh, and in fact, down in Bakersfield, I don't know if it might have quit this year, but they used to do Dust Bowl days every October. And in the site that was the migrant camp that John Steinbeck used in Grapes of Wrath, several of the buildings are still there. And so they have this gathering. And what's interesting to realize as you go to these gatherings in California is that, you know, these migrants who came to California, they put down roots. They stayed as harshly as they were treated in California. Yeah. They stayed, they put down roots. They are now, I think, a huge part of the, you know, the California landscape and the fabric. And it's really neat to see how they still have stayed together generationally, to sort of keep alive what they went through and the strength it took them to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, do you think, I noticed after Nightingale came out that suddenly there were World War II books coming out everywhere, right? So now I'm like starting to look for like, okay, now there's going to be a whole rash of Depression era books. Do you think we'll see a lot of that now?
I don't know, no, I would say no, because the thing about World War II, and one of the reasons that I felt comfortable choosing World War II as my launch pad and my breaking out, to try to write a historical fiction novel, is the fact that it is a beloved time period. And, you've got what you so rarely have in life, good versus evil, and stakes that couldn't be higher. You're talking about conflict. World War II is up here. And so I think, I'm not alone, obviously, in realizing that this is rich, dramatic ground. And there are so many stories yet to be told. Yes. I think the Dust Bowl and, and the Great Depression, all of this, I think there are a lot more stories to be told, and I hope people tell them. But I don't know that it will, spawn an industry the way.
I think it will. I think it will. We'll suddenly see a rash of these.
So?
Great.
I'll tell you what I will predict. You will see this cover reproduced in some version a lot.
Yes, they do the same thing with the cover. Correct. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they do it. Zina Lynch said her high school English teacher was a child back in the Dust Bowl days, and she would tell them stories of losing their home, being homeless and driving around slowly, and it was the kids' job to watch for rabbits that their dad would try to catch so they could eat. They were driving around looking for odd jobs the dad could do. So you probably heard a lot of these types of stories. And Kelly Carlson wants to know, and we were kind of touching on this already, she said, how hard was it to write about the Depression but still include hope?
So let me just make one comment before I get to that question about the stories that people hear from their grandparents. One of the things that I learned so much with the Nightingale, and I am learning again with the Great Depression, is that a lot of these stories have not been passed along to children and grandchildren. And so I would say to anybody who has these stories in their family or who grew up in these areas, ask your grandparents for these stories and write them down and pass them along, because these stories are being lost. And with regard to, what was the second question?
Well, just before we get to that, I'll ask that in a sec, because I've got that down here. But I also want to say, I respect what you just said, because I really wish my father, who died when I was 20, he fought in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. And he was this strong, silent type. He never talked about it. And we got little glimpses of a story where, he got shot by a sniper. And so he had a Purple Heart. It was in his arm and it just passed through. And I always remember that scar. And, they got caught behind enemy lines and it was freezing cold and they had to break the little canal to try and get out with their rifle butts. And one fellow, that my father was trying to help didn't make it. And I was so young that I don't remember pressing him for those stories because they weren't as valuable to me then as they would be now. And now I've lost the opportunity. That's all gone. So I just kind of wanted to second what you were saying. Definitely try and get those stories, because if you're like me, you'll regret it later if you don't. So
that's right. And we need these stories, that's one of the things, as I was researching the Great Depression and all of this, I should have known most of this from school. And in fact, I knew almost nothing about, I knew the Great Depression.
I knew nothing. Me too. Yeah. That's all I had. And when I picked up your book, my only experience was knowing that my parents had gone through it, but they also they never said much about it. And then I also had read John Steinbeck. And so that's kind of, I was expecting a John Steinbeck-like read, which I actually feel like you fit the bill. I felt like that was very satisfying, expecting that. And so I was very excited that you were able to execute it so great. The question was about how hard was it to write about the Depression but still include hope. And I wanted to just point out that there is a good line in the book that says, hope is a coin I carry. There were times in my journey when it felt as if that penny and the hope it represented were the only things that kept me going. So that just kind of reminded me of that line. So I wanted to throw that out there before I got your response.
Yeah, it's hard because, when you're doing all this research and you're seeing how people are living and you're trying to show what it's like living on a dirt farm in the 4th year of a drought during the Great Depression. It's hope doesn't, sort of naturally meld in your mind. It's a difficult time. But what I had to keep reminding myself was, first of all, these families who were on the Great Plains, who were farmers or, lived in the small towns there, the lion's share of them stayed through the Dust Bowl. So this drought went on for 4.5 years with, just endless black, storms rolling through, kids in gas masks, and they stayed. And so to me, the message, the sub rosa that's beneath all of the research is, this is the greatest generation. These are people with grit and resilience and endurance and a love for the land and a love for their home and a love for their American dream, that they were not going to give up lightly. And
well, like you say in the book that Elsa was one of those people who she didn't expect life to be easy. She was a worker. She just dug in. And the same with the Martinellis. So I feel like that theme really ran clearly through the book.
I think so. And I think you can't be a dry farmer in Texas and not be just imbued with hope, And so what was important was sort of the generalized hope that people were tough enough to survive whatever they had to. But then there was also, I felt a real obligation to sort of make a statement about acts of kindness and small acts of kindness. And particularly, say, in California, where Elsa and the kids get there and, and life is so difficult for them. Yeah. And yet there are these moments. There's a scene I particularly love in a beauty salon, for example. There are a couple of scenes with a librarian where people are kind to them. Yeah. And it means so much. And I think especially now as we live in this pandemic world, and as we look at who we want to be as humans, that we remember that kindness matters so much. Yeah. And you have no idea what a person is going through, and to do your best.
Yeah. And I also like that what you were kind of getting at for me in the book was, although Elsa maybe didn't have the charm and the bells and whistles and the fun, it kind of reminded me of my grandmother. I mean, she was a really hard woman, but man, if you needed her, she was the one who would be there for you. So you could have all these smiling, pleasant people that fade away with the wind. But she was the one, even though she was ornery, she was tough. You know what I mean? You knew you could depend on her. And in my life, I've chosen to people it. Those are the people that are more important to me, the people that have the grit to stick behind you regardless. And rather than, just kind of the smiling, but they don't have the strength, and the charm.
Well, when you look at people that are our grandparents' age, not to interrupt, but you look at these people, these are people who lived through the Great Depression, World War II, all of these things. And I mean, I wouldn't suffer fools gladly after all of that. And I would value, resilience, and I would expect it of people. And you can certainly understand that, I think, more having read a book like The Four Winds. I mean, a lot of people have said to me, oh, now I understand my grandmother. Now I understand why she saved foil, why she saved saran wrap, all of that sort of thing.
Yes, that's exactly my grandmother. Ellen Palmer said, did you model Elsa after a real person that endured the Dust Bowl and the hardships of that time?
You know what? I did not actually. The memoirs that I read and the people that I talked to, the women were certainly of a type. I mean, these were tough, no nonsense, often religious, deeply connected to the land women who cared about their children, cared about their communities. A lot of them were gardeners. A lot of them were, farmers. But what actually inspired me for Elsa is a photo from Dorothea Lange. And, she was, as you know, FDR hired artists during the Great Depression to chronicle the country, thank gosh. And so Dorothea Lange went out and took these photographs that are just, the most iconic one is Migrant Mother, which almost everybody knows. But there's a photograph called Woman of the High Plains that is this tall, thin, sort of angular-faced woman putting her hand like this on her head, looking out at the horizon. Yeah. And I looked at her and I saw despair and loss and fear, and I knew that she survived, and I knew that she was looking out trying to figure out how to survive, and I wanted to understand who this woman is and how she moved forward feeling all those things.
Yeah, so yeah. I loved that you also made her very tall. It just having her be slightly awkward, slightly different. I think that just added so much to who the character was and what she had to deal with, beyond all of her other physical challenges, or as they came up through the book. So I thought that was just genius. But okay, so Marcia Tennant's. We already asked that one because I covered it earlier. She was the one that wanted to know about fact and fiction. Okay, Judy Tucker wants to know which character was the most difficult to write.
In the Four Winds, oh, Loretta. I mean, there's nothing like a rebelling adolescent teenager.
You nailed that one.
And I know that,
sorry for Elsa that she couldn't have a closer relationship with Loretta there, when she was when she was so in love with her father and his charm. And yeah, I thought that was,
Well, and of course, Elsa had been raised to have such low self-esteem. And so Loretta she was afraid of Loretta, who I thought of as beautiful and fiery and romantic and, all of these things. And it's really hard when you write an adolescent character that is acting out. Something like 70% of your readers go, oh, either I was that girl or I had that girl. And they understand what it's like to be, a pretty witchy teenager to your mother. Yeah. But there are always women who think, well, no one should talk to her mother like that. So it's always difficult for me because I'm more Team Elsa as I'm writing this, and I'm thinking, Loretta, don't say that. That is so mean. And yet I make her say it anyway.
Of course, you got to go there. That's what made the book.
That's right. Like you said, conflict. Yeah, I mean, just that little bit of tension keeps the reader going, wondering, is she finally going to be able to iron out and get close to her daughter? So yeah, I love that element of it too. Amy Nemiroff wants to know, what was your inspiration behind the relationship between Elsa and her parents? The thing about Elsa and her parents was that it was really I was commenting upon how much the things we hear as children impacts who we believe we are. And, her parents had sort of taught Elsa that she was a lot of negative things, that she was unmarriageable, that she was unattractive, that she was sickly, all these things, which I, as the author, never believed any of them were true. But the fact was that Elsa had. And I just wanted to sort of remark upon this idea that what we learn about ourselves as children is something that we have to, I think, constantly question as we get older and ask ourselves, it's not about how other people see us. It's ultimately about how we see ourselves. And that was, the lesson of Elsa sort of finding her voice.
But it can also be like almost the longer we believe that, it's almost like cement. It hardens and gets harder and harder to change.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So very, very interesting. Michelle Bissett said, I like how you described family, not as a blood relative, but as others who are there for you. Do you have an extended family of non-blood relatives who are always there for you? Sounds like even your editor and agent might be part of that sort of.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say it's sort of the biggest of that group is my girlfriends who are always there. And but beyond that, I think one thing that we have all of us learned through this pandemic is how much being in the room with the people that we love and care about matters.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're all doing Zooms. I'm doing Zoom with my 90-year-old uncle in Saskatchewan. You know, we're all doing these things because we have to, because this is, you know, how we keep each other safe. But the bottom line is that these people who make up our posse enrich our lives in a way that I don't know if any of us really fully understood how much it meant just to have your family over and sit in your back and have a barbecue until this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. Once it's taken away, suddenly you realize the value of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Laura Meyer just had a comment. I enjoyed how you melded a cultural and environmental issue with your story. So that was a nice compliment. Andrea Carlson said, did you realize that your book would highlight how many things haven't changed? Like the prejudice against outsiders, which was really out of staters. We're still seeing these prejudices. Did you realize you had something to say on that?
Sure. I mean, that's why I picked this time period, because when I was looking, you know, through history to find a time that had been difficult, that was as difficult almost as wartime, where women had been marginalized to the point that we had no idea what women were even doing. And I sort of came across the Great Depression. This was 4 years ago. And, you know, at the time of the Great Depression, the world was politically very divided. You know, there were all of these issues going on. The Dust Bowl is the greatest environmental disaster in American history. And so when I was reading about what was going on during the Depression, and this is even without the pandemic, it felt like, sadly, a lot of it could be today. A lot of these arguments, a lot of what was going on could be today. Yeah. And so that was part of why, you know, I went here, because I believed one of the cornerstones of fiction is the ability to both educate and create empathy. And so my thought was, if I could teach people, you know, what we did almost 100 years ago and how it is still similar, and how changes can be made in the way you feel, then I will have, you know, I think that's something that really
you can change
matters.
a whole civilization by changing individuals' hearts, right? So I feel like I read somewhere that readers are, of course, much more empathetic, and it's because we have practice in looking at the world and issues, problems through multiple perspectives. So I think that this definitely is a great way to shed light on some of the problems, and hopefully people are self-aware enough to say, oh, you know, just like she did, this is still happening. I see this elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I'm respectful of your time. I want to make sure that we aren't going too late. So let me just see if there's any really burning questions that we haven't gotten to yet. Mariana McCroskey says, congrats on having one of the best books in 2021. She said she even convinced her husband to read it, and he shed tears too.
Wow, thank you.
And she wants to know, this is a perfect segue. I guess we'll end with this one. What's on the horizon next?
You know, this is so interesting to me, Brenda, because like we were talking in the green room, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been writing book after book after book, and I'm very, very good at the writing as a job mindset. You know, I don't like candles. I don't need to be inspired.
Not waiting for your muse to speak to you.
Yeah, I don't need music or a bath. You know, I sit down to write, and I write because that's what I do. And I'm comfortable with writing bad stuff if it can't feel good. You know, I've made all those sort of concessions to how I do this career, and I have been able for 30 years. I wrote through my husband's cancer for 2 years. I have written through my dad's illness. I write. That's what I do. And writing is my safe place. You know, that's the place where I go and close the door, and it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. I'm okay. I'm in control of this world that I'm creating. And interestingly enough, this pandemic is the first thing ever that sort of threw me off my game. And you know, I was like a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of your readers, there was a good 3 or 4 month period where nothing I read impacted me. Nothing got through. I was impatient. I kept putting books down and starting different books, and I was asking too much of books, and because I wanted, I guess, to be swept away. And it took me probably 3 or 4 or 5 months to get to the point where I accepted, okay, wait a second, this is the new world order. I don't get to just dither. I don't get to not be who I am. I don't get to not lose myself in books. I have to hunker down, and I have to be better at this. And so I slowly started finding books that I loved. And you know how I did it? I went back to genre. I went back to the kind of books, thrillers and, romantic women's fiction and mysteries, the stuff that just sweeps me away because it's high stakes. It's a book you can't put down. And then I started thinking, okay, now it's time to start writing again. And that's just been in the last probably 4 or 5 months. So I am researching the next book, and I wish I could say, hey, this is it, I got it nailed, but we'll see.
But you have an idea, which is exciting, obviously.
I have an idea, which is cautiously exciting, yes.
Oh, that's great. Well, this pandemic kind of did the opposite, sounds like to me, than it did to you, because at first I wasn't glad for the pandemic, but I was glad for the slowdown of time, just because I was so incredibly busy. So the fact that everything sort of stopped and I didn't have to feel like I'm missing out or still juggling to keep up with it all, I actually was able to hunker down, and I worked and I worked. But then after a while, it suddenly felt so barren and empty and odd. You know what I mean? That suddenly it got really difficult. So more toward the end. So October, November, I found myself really struggling to try and work on the book that I was working on. So I'm glad that you found your groove again. That's good to hear. We're excited.
Well, you do so much more than I do. I mean, it makes me tired listening to everything that you actually accomplish. If I were half that driven, I would be twice as happy, I'm sure.
Well, I'm really glad I started this book group, because you were talking about the importance of friendships, and especially during these difficult times. And I feel as though these people have really done a lot, not only to support me and the other authors that we've featured, but each other. They've become friends. They have book buddies inside the group that have helped them, get to know each other better and become a more close knit. And I've had so many messages of people saying, I'm so glad you've given us something to do. So that makes it all worthwhile. And I couldn't do it without people like you being willing to be featured and spend an hour with us talking about your work. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciated having you here tonight, and especially the talent that you have with your writing, the joy you bring us with your books. It's so wonderful. I can't wait to see what's next. Do you have any idea of title or era or anything you can share?
A bus needs to pull up next to me. That's all I can say.
She's still waiting for the bus.
I am.
I hope that happens for you soon.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda. This has been absolutely marvelous. And I'll go on Facebook and check out what people have to say, and look forward to reading that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a nice night.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Wow, wasn't Kristin easy to talk to and wonderful? And I just knew that getting the chance to spend some time with her would be a lot of fun. I hope that you all enjoyed it just as much as I did. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. I wanted to be really respectful of her time, because she's had to do so many of these since her book came out a couple of months ago. But hopefully I covered most of them, and we got through at least the highlights. Before I go, I wanted to announce our top 10 contributors in the book group for March. This is, so they are Deanne Kraft, Bobby Radford, Nicole Duvall, Karen Carr, Star Roybal, Nancy Brady, Angie Christensen, Elizabeth Cronin, Marie Christensen, and Virgie Lang. So as you know, the Bookstore on the Beach is our read for April, and we have our book group meeting on April 29th. That's, of course, when we will announce the winner to the photo contest. As I mentioned before, we will get our April book boxes out just as fast as we can. But as I said, the books are delayed, so we're a little worried about that, hoping they come and that I can get them signed and sent to the fulfillment house, my niece, Jennifer, for packing in the future. Also, I wanted to say, I didn't want to break up the interview with giveaways. I was enjoying Kristin so much, but if you lasted with me all the way through and you're here with me now, I'm going to pick 3 winners who joined all the way to the end to win a surprise package. So look for our email or our post, our post where we announce the winners. We will tag everybody, give you a link to so you'll know where to go to claim your prize. And let me see if there was anything else I wanted to tell you guys today. Oh, if you're not already a member of my online book group here on Facebook, be sure to join. Just type in Brenda Novak's book group and it'll take you there. We have a fabulous author like Kristin every month. We have meetings, we have book buddies, we have the book boxes, so many fun things. So definitely check it out and I hope to see you there.